February 27, 1943. 9 men stood at the edge of a 600-foot ravine in occupied Norway. Below them, a frozen river. Above them, searchlights swept across the Vemork hydroelectric plant, the most heavily guarded industrial facility in Nazi-controlled Europe. Inside that plant, Adolf Hitler's scientists were producing the one ingredient they needed to build the world's first atomic bomb: heavy water. These 9 commandos knew the odds. 3 months earlier, a British glider assault on the same target had ended in disaster. 41 men dead. Survivors tortured and executed by the Gestapo. Hitler's commando order was clear. All captured saboteurs would be killed on sight. No trial, no mercy. Each man carried a cyanide pill. If caught, they knew what to do. But tonight, they would attempt the impossible. They would descend into that ravine, cross the ice, climb a cliff the Germans believed was uncrossable, infiltrate the plant, destroy the heavy water production facility, and escape, all without alerting the 3,000 German troops stationed in the valley. This is Operation Gunnerside, the mission that stopped Hitler's atomic bomb, and every word of it is true. To understand why 9 men risked everything on a February night, you need to understand what was at stake. By 1942, Allied intelligence had learned something terrifying. German scientists, led by Werner Heisenberg, were ahead of everyone else in the race to build an atomic bomb. And they had one critical advantage: the only industrial-scale heavy water production facility in the world. Vemork, Norway. Heavy water, deuterium oxide, looks like regular water, but its atoms are heavier. And in 1943, it was the key ingredient Nazi scientists needed to build a working nuclear reactor, the first step toward a functioning atomic bomb. Without it, the German bomb program would collapse. When Germany invaded Norway in April 1940, they immediately seized Vemork. Production orders came from Berlin: increase output, ship everything to Germany. The Allies knew what this meant. If Hitler got the bomb first, the war was over. British intelligence received word from the Norwegian resistance. A scientist named Leif Tronstad, a chemistry professor who had worked at Vemork before the war, smuggled out blueprints and production data. His message was clear: Vemork had to be destroyed. The British Special Operations Executive began planning the most dangerous sabotage mission of the war. In October 1942, 4 Norwegian commandos parachuted onto the Hardangervidda Plateau. Their mission: Operation Grouse. Establish a base, scout the target, prepare for the main assault. The team leader was 2nd Lieutenant Jens Anton Poulsen, age 24. His men: Sergeant Arne Kjelstrup, 29, 2nd Lieutenant Knut Haugland, 25, and Sergeant Klaus Hellberg, 23. All born in the Yukon area, all expert skiers and survivalists. They landed in a blizzard, miles off target. But they made it to the mountains and waited. November 19th, 1942. 2 British Horsa gliders, carrying 34 Royal Engineers, took off from Scotland. Their mission: Operation Freshman. Fly to Norway. Link up with the Grouse team. Storm Vemork with overwhelming force. It was a catastrophe. Both gliders crashed in the Norwegian mountains. Some men died instantly. Others survived the impact, broken and bleeding in the wreckage. The Grouse team, monitoring their radios in the wilderness, heard the terrible news. No survivors reached the rendezvous point. What happened next was worse. The Gestapo found the crash sites. 23 British commandos were captured. They were interrogated, tortured, then executed under Hitler's commando order, issued just 1 day before the Grouse team had landed. The order was explicit: All Allied commandos, even those in uniform, even those trying to surrender, would be killed immediately. The Germans found something in the wreckage, a map, marked with a red circle around Vemork. Now they knew. The Allies wanted this plant badly enough to sacrifice dozens of men trying to reach it. Security was doubled. Minefields were expanded. Searchlights installed. The single bridge leading to the facility was now guarded around the clock by armed sentries. And in the mountains, the 4 men of Operation Grouse realized they were stranded. Winter was closing in. Their food supplies were nearly gone, and the Germans were hunting for them. They retreated deeper into the wilderness and waited for orders from London. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. They survived on reindeer moss and lichen scraped from under the snow. On Christmas Eve, they finally killed a reindeer. For 2 months, they lived entirely on its meat, eating every part of the animal, including the stomach contents mixed with blood for vitamin C. The grouse team, now renamed Swallow, endured the harshest winter of the war. But they stayed operational. And in February 1943, London sent word. A new team was coming. This time, there would be no gliders, no massive assault, just 6 more Norwegian commandos, and a plan so audacious, the Germans would never see it coming. February 16, 1943. A Halifax bomber flew over the Hardangervidda Plateau under cover of a snowstorm. 6 men jumped into the darkness. This was Operation Gunnerside, led by 23-year-old First Lieutenant Joachim Ronneberg. His team, Second Lieutenant Knut Haukelid, 31, Sergeant Frederick Kaiser, 24, Second Lieutenant Casper Eidland, 24, Sergeant Hans Storhaug, 27, and Sergeant Birger Stromsheim, 31, the oldest man on the team. Before they jumped, their commanding officer, Colonel Leif Tronstad, told them something they would never forget. Quote, "I cannot tell you why this mission is so important, but if you succeed, it will live in Norway's memory for 100 years." End quote. He was right, but he didn't tell them about the atomic bomb. He couldn't. The secret was too sensitive. All they knew was that Vemork produced heavy water, and destroying it was worth dying for. Each man wore a British Army uniform under their snowsuits. If they were caught, the British would be blamed, not the Norwegian resistance. The local population might be spared German reprisals. It was a small mercy in a brutal war. They landed 45 kilometers from the Swallow team's position. A blizzard pinned them down in an abandoned hunting cabin for 5 days. Finally, on February 22nd, the 2 teams linked up. 9 men. 9 men against 3,000 German troops and the most fortified industrial site in occupied Norway. Ronneberg laid out the plan. The Germans expected an attack across the bridge. It was the only obvious route. So they wouldn't use it. Instead, they would do something the Germans believed was impossible. They would descend 600 feet into the ravine, cross the frozen Mana River, and climb the cliff on the opposite side. The Germans had written off this approach as suicide. No one could climb that cliff in winter. In the dark. On the night of February 27th, at 8 post-meridium, the 9 commandos left their hideout and skied toward Vemork. They carried explosives, wire cutters, chloroform to silently disable guards, and those cyanide pills, just in case. Each man knew his role. 4 would form the demolition team. 5 would provide cover. Knut Haugland and Einar Skinnerland, the resistance contact, stayed behind at a cabin to maintain radio contact with London. 11:45 post-meridium. The commandos reached the edge of the ravine. Wind howled through the gorge. Searchlights swept across the plant above. German sentries paced the bridge. One wrong move, one sound, and it was over. Klaus Hellberg had scouted the route earlier. He led them down. The descent was treacherous. Ice, loose rocks, 600 feet of near vertical terrain. At the bottom, they crossed the Mana River, slipping on hidden ice beneath the surface. Then they started climbing. 500 feet straight up the opposite cliff. In the middle of the night, in the middle of winter. They made it. At the top, they followed an unguarded railway track that led directly to the plant's rear entrance. The Germans had never imagined anyone would come this way. No alarms, no patrols. The commandos cut through a fence and entered the facility. Inside, they split into two groups. 5 men took covering positions near the barracks, the bridge, and the main gate. If shooting started, they would buy time for the demolition team to finish the job. But the goal was silence. Total silence. Ronneberg led the 4-man demolition team into the basement. They found the heavy water production room exactly where Tronstad's blueprints said it would be. 18 electrolysis cells, 4 feet tall, filled with heavy water. This was the target. They encountered one Norwegian civilian employee. He didn't resist, didn't raise the alarm. He knew what they were doing and why. The team placed their charges, less than 10 pounds of explosives. British-made fuses designed for a 2-minute delay. But Ronneberg made a decision. He cut the fuses to 30 seconds. They needed to move fast. He lit the fuses. The team ran. The explosion was thunderous inside the room, but the thick concrete walls and the basement location muffled the sound. Outside, the German guards barely noticed. The commandos regrouped at the top of the cliff. Not a single shot fired, not a single casualty. They had destroyed over 500 kilograms of heavy water and every piece of equipment needed to produce more. The demolition was perfect. But now came the hard part. Escape. 3,000 German soldiers were about to descend on this valley. The commandos had to disappear. 5 men, including Ronneberg, skied 400 kilometers to Sweden. It took 18 days through open wilderness in soaking wet gear and dwindling food supplies. 4 others, including Hellberg, Kjellstrup, Haukelid, and Haugland, remained in Norway to continue resistance work. They vanished into the mountains. Every single commando survived. The Germans launched the largest manhunt in Norwegian history. They found nothing. Operation Gunnerside was complete. The British Special Operations Executive would later call it the most successful act of sabotage in all of World War II. Even the German commander in Norway, Generaloberst Nicholas von Falkenhorst, reportedly said it was, quote, the most splendid coup, end quote. The raid delayed German heavy water production by months. The plant was rebuilt by April, but in November 1943, American bombers struck Vemork. The facility was heavily damaged. The Germans gave up. They tried to ship remaining stocks of heavy water to Germany by ferry in February 1944. Norwegian saboteurs sank the ferry. The heavy water went to the bottom of Lake Tinn. With it went Hitler's last chance at an atomic bomb. Joachim Ronneberg, the last surviving member of Operation Gunnerside, died in October 2018 at age 99. He never sought glory. He simply said they had done their duty. 9 men. 1 night. The mission that may have saved the world. And they did it without firing a single shot.